All right. I've got Bena B. Daz. I hope I'm saying that right. If I butcher that, I'm sorry. You can correct me when you come up. Here, you're up next. And OFQ, you're right up after him. Them. Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. How do I say your name? Or what would you like me to call you?
Ben Abdaz.
Ben Abdaz. Okay. Ben Abdaz. All right. Well, thanks for waiting, and thanks for requesting the guest up.
Yep. No worries. How you doing today?
So, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I don't know what part of the world you're in, but in the U.S. it's the July 4th holiday, so had a little time. Thought I'd jump in, do some live for a while, before everything gets popping.
If you don't mind me asking, like, why do you do this?
Why do I do this? It is to help me understand why people believe what they believe and how they determined it's true. It's a hobby of mine, and it's very, very interesting to me. And to me, it is. I've had conversations with folks where we debate, we kind of go back and forth, and I found for me they don't turn out to be very productive. Like, I don't understand the person's point very well because I spend a lot of time trying to convey my points. So I take this approach because I want to understand where people are coming from, and that helps me learn.
So, if I understood you correctly, you're trying to ascertain what the truth is.
Yeah, I think ultimately, so.
You do believe
truth is important to me.
So you do believe in objective truths that they exist.
I do. Now, what I've also found is that folks have a different idea of what objective truth is. So it would really depend on your definition of that, whether or not you agree with me. What do you see as objective truth, or how do you define it?
Yeah, anything that's true, that exists or is a fact in reality, independent of human subjectivity. So by definition, truth cannot be subjective.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So, all right. Well, with that, what is your God belief?
So, just wanted to clarify one more thing. So when you say, when you accept the existence of objective truths, what's your basis for that belief?
My basis is the evidence. So whether or not a truth is objective, and whether or not there is a consensus to it. Like what you said, objectivity. I think it implies consensus, or it requires a consensus. Maybe it just depends who you talk to. That would be one of the things. Now, are there things that have consensus that aren't true? You could argue that. There have been things throughout history that had consensus and was accepted as true, and then later turned out not to be true. So then it would probably be a lot based on evidence.
So hypothetically, if we can do a thought experiment and say that, let's say if all 8 billion people, or however people there are that exist right now, come to the conclusion that the Earth is flat, would it make it flat?
It would not make it flat. Just from that conclusion alone, no. So there would have to be evidence. Yeah, it's not necessarily consensus. I would probably have to correct that and say consensus based on the evidence given, or the fact, the data given. Now, when we say data, it could be claims, it could be evidence, it could be incorrect evidence. Like for example, if we're investigating a crime and there's evidence there at the scene, that's data, and that can be misinterpreted, right? So if a group of detectives misinterpret the data and they accuse the wrong person, I don't think that's that's not necessarily objective, although it could be seen as that, but you would have to find that out later. Does that make sense?
Well, what I was trying to understand is like the belief that objective truths are true, or they do exist. Is it what is that based on? Is it based on your induction throughout your life experience, or is that some other logical presupposition that you're making, or something as fundamental as accepting that objective truths are true? So let me go spend hours on TikTok trying to talk to people about their God belief, right? So I mean, you're putting your energy into this idea of truth, but when someone is like, for instance, it's not just you, right? I mean, I'm going to ask this to anyone who, why is it that you believe objective truths are true? In my opinion, I accept objective truths as just it's a presupposition, it's an axiom that I have to accept. There's no empirical evidence for it. Like, I cannot do a science experiment and give you that kind of position that I hold. Nor is it based on other people's testimonial evidence. It's not that scientists have come and told me or written books about objective truth. Therefore I believe that objective truths exist. I think it's just innately inside of me somehow, that I have to kind of presuppose. So,
okay,
would you accept that? Would you accept things that exist that are so true to you, but they're not verifiable, like the existence of truth?
I would say that if it's not verifiable, because even axioms in a sense can be verifiable, and I would say it would really depend what you're talking about, but I'd say in many cases no. That's just my take.
So let's say logic, right? You believe or you accept logic as an axiom?
I would accept logic as a property or as a condition. I don't think it's necessarily an axiom. But let me back that up, because I want to be sure I know that I'm using axiom correctly.
It's a first principle that you cannot do an actual science experiment for let's say logical truths.
Yeah. So now it says here, a statement or proposition which is regarded as being established, accepted, or self-evidently true. So, yeah. So, self-evident. So now, is that subject to opinion? Maybe. Sometimes it could be. But yeah, I can think of a lot of things that are axioms. But I guess. But let's go back to what you're. Well, are you finished clarifying, or do we need to clarify it a little bit more?
I just want to establish, before we move on, I just want to make sure we're on the same page, so we're not talking past each other. So,
I hear you.
In this reality that we live in, you and I both accept things to be true based on unverifiable. It's just that things are self-evident. We do accept them to be true.
Well, I can't think of. Well, see, the thing is that I think, I don't know if to me there is a difference between self-evident and unverifiable. Do you see a difference between that, or do you think they're the same?
I think they're pretty much the same. It's maybe colloquially people use it differently. I would define it to be
okay.
So axioms, first principles, subjective, like truths. But all of these are unverifiable.
All right. And just to let you know, I'm not here to debate, and I'm not going to try to refute you or anything like that. I'm here to understand where you're coming from. So my first point of understanding is that you feel that self-evident truth and unverifiable truth are the same.
Yeah, not only that, I would say I would take it to the extent that the only thing we know for sure, which is our own
Mm-hmm.
existence, is unverifiable. So the most
Okay.
powerful
All right.
form of epistemology, in my opinion, and more stronger than accepting scientific truths, because
Mm-hmm.
in scientific truths you're still putting your trust. You're putting your trust in tools and measurements and other people in the
Mm-hmm.
lab doing experiments for you. So I think it's a step lower than accepting that I exist, which is
Okay.
completely subjective.
All right. Do you want to tackle the your statement, this statement, or is there something else you want to tackle that we can talk about?
Yeah, we can build on this premise.
Build on that.
Um,
Okay. Could you
so
restate the premise just so that I'm clear and that I'm with you, that I'm on the same page as you?
so regardless of my upbringing and where I was born, I could start from blank slate. I could just say I exist. That's how I start my
Mm-hmm.
epistemology. So I exist. Um, and the interesting is, I think philosophers like Nietzsche actually had an even. I think he had an objection to that as well, because he said that, why are you presupposing that I and I exist? But that's taking it
Mm.
too far. Then you're going into solipsism. You're going into things that, none of this would make sense. And if
Mm.
solipsism is where this leads to, then having a conversation about anything is meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
We are presupposing certain things. We're presupposing that in this discussion right now, I'm presupposing that you understand English, and that that I understand English and stuff like that. So there's a commonality
Mm-hmm.
in our discourse. There's a lot of presupposition we're doing, and when we approach the idea of truth, we are presupposing a lot of things. We are presupposing that I exist, that
Mm-hmm.
logic is true, logic will lead me to truths.
Mm-hmm.
We also presupposing, when we do make empirical claims, that our senses are reliable. So that's the third thing we're
Mm-hmm.
presupposing. So well, there are
Mm-hmm.
two ways to
Mm-hmm.
approach this. Coming back to your topic of God belief, in my opinion, I've talked to a lot of atheists in the past, and the way to approach the idea of God existing or not existing, I think you can. A theist can literally just say, I presuppose a God exists, and then that explains the whole of reality. Like, I don't have to do anything else. There just one presupposition I have to make. But when you do the more kalam type of reasoning, where you're presupposing logic, you're
Oh,
presupposing
wait. Kalam? Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. What's Kalam?
kalam, cosmological arguments of contingency, and
Cosmological.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Cosmological arguments.
kalam would
Okay, thanks.
include, yeah, kalam would include both contingency and causality. So that's like you can take that path also. It all depends on where your interlocutor agrees with you and what his presuppositions are. So if your presuppositions are that causality is true, right? I mean, in this world that we live in, I can, with certainty say that everything that I see based on induction, that has to have a cause. Like, logically, I can deduce that. Based on that reasoning, if you
Mm-hmm.
accept that premise, then we can build on that premise. If you don't accept that
Mm-hmm.
premise, then you have to kind of lean on maybe the contingency argument, that how can dependent things depend on each other for infinity, stuff like that. So there are two ways to approach this idea of God belief. A theist can just literally walk away saying that God exists, and that explains why everything else exists, like why laws of gravity exist, why morality exists, why everything
Mm-hmm.
that we see or do or can conceive of exists. So if someone's position is that the least number of presuppositions is is what will lead to truth, then I think a theist would have a higher ground there, because you're making just one presupposition there. But it all depends, really. It all depends on where you start in my opinion, proofs about anything in life depend on where your presuppositions start, and it literally, like, if you don't agree with the premises or presuppositions, then of course the conclusion will not follow. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's kind of my way of approaching this idea.
All right. I have a question, Ben Abdaz. Is it possible to come into a situation like this and not have any presuppositions? And if so, what would that look like?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that for a human being to not have any presuppositions, like.
Any, yeah, any presuppositions. Yeah, I think I agree with that. Okay, so if someone says, taking your example, the theist presupposition God exists, and then would it be fair to say the atheist position God does? I don't believe God exists, or God does not exist, because there's kind of a spectrum with atheism.
What's the
So
distinction there? If you don't mind me clarifying, what's the distinction between I don't believe and I
to
believe?
me, to
Just in
me,
general, because
I don't.
I've had an issue with this concept of lack of belief. I just don't think
Mhm.
it's a very coherent idea, because when we talk about God belief, it's a dichotomous proposition, right? Either God exists or doesn't exist.
Right.
When someone says they lack belief, are they just stating their state of mind that has nothing to do with the external reality? Because as soon as you make a claim about God, we are talking about something that's external just to the human mind, right? So it's irrelevant what your subjective kind of emotional state is, like kind of psychological state of mind is, that you lack belief or you lack confidence. It's Can you clarify that for me? Like, I just struggle with
Sure.
that
Yeah.
idea. Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of like this. Here, I'll try my best with an analogy, and hopefully this analogy doesn't fail, but I'll try my best. Um, let's say I'm driving down the street, and and a car hits me and then does a hit and run, right? Um, so a car hits me, does a hit and run, drives off, and the police are taking my statement, and the officer asks me what color was the car. So to me, the difference would be if I said, I believe the car was blue versus the car was blue. So if I said, I believe the car was blue, that would mean that I think it was blue, but I'm not sure. But I have reason to believe it was. Maybe it was at night and it was really dark. So it could have been blue. It could have been dark gray. It could have been like black, like it could have been a really, really dark blue that was black, or it could have been black that looked blue because of the light. I'm not sure. I could say I believe it was blue. But if, let's say, it was that maybe I was, so it just depends on the circumstances. Maybe this car was driving beside me for a while, and then something happened, and then it hit me. And so I got a good look at the car. So then it would be based on the belief versus the belief statement, I believe, versus is or is not, is just purely based on evidence for me. It's based on what I know at that point in time. So, so that's how it. So when we take it to, I don't believe in God versus there is no God. There is no God is a definitive statement, like, and I would say versus I don't believe there's a God, meaning for me at least, from what I have seen so far, it does not support the existence of a God, but I'm open to seeing if there's something else out there. That would be the way I put it.
So,
Am I making?
is it
Does that
possible
make
for you?
sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, yeah. I kind of got an idea of what you said there, but
Okay.
is it possible for you to say, no, it was blue and it turned to be black? And is it possible for you to say, I believe it was blue, turned out to be blue?
Sorry, brother, you're breaking up. I heard that. All I heard was, "Is it possible for you to?" And then it broke up. So could you say it again?
Yeah. So is it possible for you to say that I know it was blue, and it turned out to be black in reality?
It's possible. It's possible. Because, like
Okay.
I said, it
But
is
is it
possible. And I think it's so. Then part of it also is degree of certainty.
so where's the useful distinction here between knowledge and belief? Because I could say I know something is true, and it could turn out to be false. And I could say I believe something is
Mm-hmm.
true, and it could turn out to be true. Like I don't I don't find this distinction very useful in a philosophical sense, because your epistemology is still the same. It doesn't change. Like,
No, it
you
doesn't.
know what I
You're right.
mean?
I think nope. I see exactly what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. And in my estimation, it is independent of whether or not I'm right or wrong. It is a level of certainty based on my willingness to accept more information, because I think that when I am 100% certain of something, that means I don't need any more information. I know this to be true. So there's nothing that you could tell me to either make me more or less confident. So I have all the information I need. I have decided. It is decided. Like, here's another example. Let's say I'm going to buy a car, right? Um, and I'm deciding between a Toyota and a Honda. And I say I'm looking at both information for both cars that I'm looking at, like a Camry and an Accord. And I say I believe I want the Honda Accord. I believe that's the better car for me. Versus I know this is the better car for me. The Honda is the better car for me. That's the better car. I'm going to buy that car. Um, so it is. So it's now I could be wrong, right? Could I be wrong that the Honda is not the better car for me? That it's actually the Toyota. Like, maybe I find that out later, because I don't really know until I actually have the car for a while, right? So what if I buy the Honda and then 6 months later I find out, oh, you know what? Turns out I should have gotten the Toyota. I made a mistake. Um, but that doesn't change the fact that, whether or not I was right or wrong doesn't change the fact that I was certain. That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay, but when it comes to God belief, do you
Mm-hmm.
see the issue with conflating it with like an kind of an empirical type of inquiry versus a logical inquiry? Because it's a logical dichotomy, right? Either God exists or doesn't exist. There's no
Correct.
we're not expecting someone to go in and do a science experiment in a lab, to kind of make this proposition more knowable than what the scope is. Like, the scope is
Mm-hmm.
still dichotomous. Like, the scope of evidence is still available for anyone to come to that conclusion of whether God exists or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because if someone is waking up in the morning and spends a whole 24 hours uh, suggesting or doing stuff that would suggest that he or she does not believe in God, so that's their position. They currently believe that God does not exist. So what I'm trying to like really establish here is, like, I don't find it useful when people say they don't believe in God, and they make that distinction that, oh, I don't believe in God, and I didn't say that, I believe that God does not exist. So I just think there's a bit of dishonesty there when they try to get away from that positive claim, because any claim like any claim like of something not existing, uh it's fine. That could be a current belief, like that's based on your current evidence. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're not convinced right now that God exists, and that you believe that God does not exist. It just I think that saying that I don't believe God exists, or I lack belief God exists, is an easier way out of a discussion, so that you don't have to justify your position. Because if someone says, for instance, like, I believe that man did not land on the moon, okay, or just say, I don't believe that landed on the moon, right? When someone makes that claim, it's still a claim, whether you call it negative claim or positive claim. Like, it's still a claim you have to
Right.
kind of justify. So when you say that I
Mm-hmm.
believe that God does not exist, uh, and or say that I don't believe God exists, but what you mean is I believe God does not exist, you still have to kind of justify your position, either give a logical argument or give some sort of argument for that claim. That's all I wanted to say.
Now, okay. Now, is it, and then just so I'm with you on this, just so we're on the same page, are you saying that that now the topic shifts to me justifying why I do not believe it, or is it still uh, the same premise? I'm
I
using the
think
same reasons of my disbelief in God as the person who just emphatically states there is no God. Is that what you're saying,
I
or
think I think
is
the
it?
burden of proof is on a theist, on an atheist, and on an agnostic. I think the burden of proof to justify their position is on all three categories. If someone says I don't know
Mm-hmm,
God exists, I still think that they have to kind of justify, like, how do you know anything is true? Like, what's your basis of knowledge? Like, so is
okay.
the concept of God unknowable to you? Like, those are the questions I would kind of ask an agnostic when they claim that they don't know if God exists. So,
Mm-hmm,
first of all, I would start obviously with the definition of God, and then I would inquire into, like, how do you know um, that this definition of God does not exist? Like, what's your evidence?
mm-hmm,
But yeah, and
mm-hmm,
same goes with a theist. Like, a theist will need to justify their position, and an atheist will need to justify their position. So the burden of proof is on everyone. Anyone who has a capacity to think or inquire into reality, or and that's one of the other things is, right, do you care if God exists? Like, a lot of people, when I get into this discussion, like, I'm asking the question, like, do you even care if God exists or not? Like, if not, then why are we having this discussion? Like, what's the definition of God? Which is, I think, an important discussion to have, is like, is the definition of God. Like, because what
mm-hmm,
happens a lot of times is, like, halfway through the conversation, um, the atheist would come along and say, "Oh no, but that's the Hindus don't believe in that God. Look, why are you?" So there's no need to talk about things we both accept are false, right? So that's what my
mm-hmm.
response would be, is that, okay, why did you bring a Hindu God into this discussion when we both believe that this is a false God? Like, I don't care if this God exists or not. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. What's your definition of God? And your
So,
question about, like, what's your definition of God?
my definition of God is a supernatural being that, uh, and that's a very, very broad definition, but I would start with that, and um, it would be under the, and see, here's the thing, it also depends, like a God, like the definition. Now, are you talking about the definition of God as in the Judeo-Christian sense, or do you mean just the word God in general?
Yeah,
Because
my
there were
definition
Greek
of
gods,
God.
there were Norse gods. That's, yeah. So I guess it just depends.
Yeah. So there is a
So I'd.
not just a difference, but it's a whole different category difference between the Norse gods or the Greek gods versus the Abrahamic God. I think it's not even in the
Mm-hmm,
same category, let alone their definitions, because we're talking about something that's uncreated, and all powerful, all knowing, worthy of worship. All these will fit in the definition of God in the Abrahamic God. What
mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm,
issue with the Norse gods and the Greek gods is that, by their own definition, they are man-made concepts. Like, if you go back and do some research, like, these gods were I think they started when Homer, I think someone started writing
mm-hmm,
poems. And so, I mean, that's a huge difference right there. I mean, the claim itself is saying that these are man-made, or created gods, versus an
okay.
uncreated God. So why should I care about something that's man-made, if, right from the claim itself, versus
Mm-hmm,
that's claiming to be, a divine or a supernatural entity that's
mm-hmm.
not man-made? That's, it's a source of all existence. Like, it's I think it is. I don't know if you would call it an equivocation fallacy or some sort of fallacy, but yeah, they're not even in the same category to have that discussion. Same goes with the Hindu gods. The Hindu gods, if you read up on them, like Ganesh or the monkey god, all of these are man-made concepts. Like by their own admission, right? By their own admission, they claim that this was a human being that got inspired, got some power from. The funny thing is, they also believe in the one true God. They just believe that I think they kind of make that distinction where that one true God is maybe not all powerful, therefore he has to distribute his powers, like the death god, the one responsible for death. It's And I've tried to clarify with the Hindu, like what did you why do you need, is it the avatars are the same concept as angels? If it is, then you're a theist, you're a monotheist. You cannot be a polytheist if you believe that the supreme being is still one. He's just assigned some tasks to, like, angels or whatever. So
Okay.
yeah, the concept of God for me is the definition that I closely believe is that I ought to care about is the Islamic definition of God.
The Islamic definition of God. And could you just say that, just so that I'm clear on what you mean?
So I would
just state it like in a sentence.
Yeah, so I would define God to be one, independent, unlike anything in creation. So anything you can imagine.
Independent. Unlike anything in creation. Okay.
In terms of conceivability, if some image comes to your mind, God is other than that. And I would define God to be an entity that's worthy of worship.
Okay, so it's an entity worthy of worship that is beyond. Would you say it's beyond our level of understanding?
In its
or is that
entirety, we know. So God, we know about God enough, or only as much as He has informed us about Him.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Either through natural revelation or through natural theology, or through revelation. So these are the two sources how we know about God. Just like how we know about the color red through experience, right? So you can also say that the definition of God we know about is through some sort of experience. Like it cannot be. It cannot be. It had to originate somewhere, right? So it's an either concept that kind of started somewhere, or God revealed Himself to a prophet, and the prophet, the books kind of were preserved, and that's how we know about God. But there's also a natural way of just knowing this idea of an infinite being. We can logically kind of conceive of it. So that's in brief. That's my definition of God.
Okay. So, and then how confident are you that this is the definition of God on a scale of 0 to 100? 100 being 100% absolutely sure, and 0, of course, being all doubts, no certainty.
What do you mean by confidence in definition? Like how
confident are you that this is the correct definition?
Well,
because would you say that there are other definitions of God?
Well, yeah, there are thousands of definitions of God, but the only definition I ought to care would be this one, yeah.
Okay, so I'm asking how certain are you that this is the definition you ought to care about and is the definition?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 100%.
Okay, very good. And I'm just trying to get like a level of certainty is just it's going to kind of follow a little bit later, but the level of certainty is just to see where you are. Doesn't really mean anything in the big sense as far as this discussion goes. It's just kind of like a marker just to see where you're at. And
Yeah,
Um,
so like
what
just to clarify on that scale, like what's the difference between, let's say, 73% versus a 95%? Like I don't really
That's a good
understand
question.
the scale here.
You don't
Like,
understand the point. You don't get the point of it. Yeah. Okay. So just for my personal understanding, it just helps to say because then the next thing I would ask you is like let's just say you're at a 73%. You declare you're at a 73%. Then I'd ask you, well, then what would it take for you to get to 80% or 90%, or 100%? What would it take? Like what's holding you back from being absolutely certain? So then, it's just it just helps me get more information. But see, but now that you said it's 100%, of course I wouldn't ask you, well, what would it take to be more certain? Because you're absolutely certain. Does that make sense?
yeah, I mean,
It's just a way for me to get.
based
It's
on
just a
my
way for me to get information. That's all it is.
the tools that I'm using, it's
Mm-hmm.
entirely based on those tools, right? So the tools that I'm using to arrive at any conclusion about certainty or not certainty are like things like logic, are things like I would say testimonial evidence, empiricism,
Mm-hmm.
personal experience. So all of these tools, obviously, if you take them away from my equation, then I would have nothing to base my confidence on, or conclusions on, right? So
Okay. So you said your tools are some. You listed a few. You said personal experience, and then what were some of the other ones?
yeah, so when I say personal experience, I don't mean some sort of like magical experience. I mean just the experience of reality, experience of my
Mm-hmm.
consciousness, experience of like the things around me. Then second would be empiricism, which is pretty much,
Empiricism.
empiricism is also part of my experience, right? Because if I do a science
Mm-hmm.
experiment, I'm relying on my senses, just like I'm adding one more kind of a step to my epistemology. Is like I'm adding my senses now.
Mm-hmm.
I have to rely on my senses to
Mm-hmm.
do this science experiment. The third level would be
Mm-hmm.
like relying on other scientists. So if a scientist comes and tells me the Earth is oblate spheroid in shape, right? And not just one scientist, many scientists have concluded that, and we have pictures which are also testimonial, and videos which are also
Mm-hmm.
testimonial. So my conclusion that the Earth is oblate spheroid in shape, I would say, is I'm 100% confident in that belief, right? But that belief is really based on like three levels of like, they're just three steps I have to, three tools basically. I'm using here. I'm relying on my experience, I'm relying on my senses, and I'm relying on other people to tell me what's true. So
Other people to tell you what's true. Okay.
yeah,
So okay, like explanations from other people, and then do you and I'm imagining you decide you read about how other explanations from other people, and then you decide, does this hold water or does this not hold water? Does that Am I
right,
right in saying that? Okay.
right. So
And
in that
then
in this scenario,
that guides you.
yeah. So let's say if I had a chance to go up in space and
Mm-hmm.
look at the shape of the planet myself, um,
Mm-hmm.
would that change my 100% confidence? Like, or I don't know. Like it's a weird like thing to think about, right? I mean, if I go up in space
Yeah.
and find out that the Earth is flat, so what happens now? So all my testimonial evidence of 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 believing in these scientists telling me that the Earth was round will turn out
Mm-hmm.
to be false, right? So now I have to rely on
Mm.
my senses. So I have like kind of rely on my senses. So my eyes should be there should be no sort of like, what is it called, like um, when you perceive something and it's not true, like
Like a
mirages.
delusion or a illusion?
No, there's another word for it.
Illusion.
Mirage. When you see the mirage.
When you mirage. Yeah, mirage. We'll go with mirage. I think I know what you're talking about, but I think I know. I'm pretty sure I know.
Yeah, the
But
word is not coming to my
want to
mind,
go with
but
mirage? Yeah, I can't think of it either, but I'll go with mirage. I think I know what you're talking about, but yeah, we'll use that. We'll use that word because I don't think it's
so
going to change what you're going to say. Yeah.
yeah. So if I'm going up into space and I find out that the Earth is actually flat, so
Yeah.
that changes my whole like my view of trusting other people and stuff like that. But no,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a flat earther.
Would
I do believe the Earth is round.
okay.
There's enough
All right.
evidence, testimonial evidence, to accept that kind
Mm-hmm.
of belief.
Okay. Now, then, does if you did now, because you had kind of said, hey, if I were able to go into outer space, take a rocket ship, go into outer space, and then see, and then everything that I was told about the Earth being spherical, and it turned out not to be true, would that lower your confidence that the Earth is round or spherical?
Yeah, of course.
And
Yeah,
then,
I would
okay, and
rely
then,
more on my my subjective experience.
okay,
Like that's
but it
the
would.
other thing, right? I mean, if it's just one trip, um,
Mm-hmm.
I could kind of like maybe doubt myself. But if there's a regular
Mm-hmm.
pattern, if I go every week up in the space
Mm-hmm.
and observe the same flatness of the Earth,
Mm-hmm.
uh, maybe I'll start doubting that it's actually round. But maybe it'll
Okay.
take a few trips, not just one.
Okay. And so I guess similarly, if you were to, because that would be, in my mind, uncovering or discovering some new information that you didn't have previously. That kind of changes your perspective of whether or not the Earth is spherical. So if we just replace that with your belief in or your statement about God, if there was something that you discovered, some information you discovered, and it is to your satisfaction, a legitimate piece of information, like going up in outer space and seeing that the Earth is flat, something like that, that contradicts some of the empirical evidence that you have. Would that lower your confidence? And if so, how much do you think it would lower it?
Well, I mean, given the definition of God that we're working with, I don't.
Yeah.
I think that my God belief is unfalsifiable, just like my belief that, my belief that that I don't know if I want to say I exist or logic exists, but it's for me the existence of God is a self-evident truth. What would be a more
Mm-hmm.
maybe reasonable question to ask is my acceptance of Islam being the true religion unfalsifiable? To that I would say maybe, yeah, maybe I could say that if you can falsify the maybe if you can produce some sort of contradiction or show some sort of contradiction, that would lower my
Mm-hmm.
confidence.
That would lower your confidence. But you don't feel that there is any evidence available that could persuade you to lower your confidence that the God as you know it exists. There's so as far as you know, there's nothing that could persuade you otherwise, or even lower your confidence maybe to 99%. And I'm
Yeah,
not saying there is, and I'm not going to offer you anything. I'm just asking is if you can conceive of anything, if it's at all possible.
yeah, I don't think I can conceive of a like I'm trying to imagine right now like what it would look like I can't
Mm-hmm.
imagine of anything that would like lower my confidence.
Okay. Yeah, and honestly, I don't have anything to offer you either. So and I wasn't about to. But see, that's the thing is my interest is, why you believe what you believe and how you came to determine it's true. And then to just kind of see where you're at in terms of confidence level. And if it's at all like if there's any possibility, any room for, moving down or up or any room to change your mind at all.
Yeah, like I said, like there
So
are
that's
many
kind
things
of,
that are unverifiable in
mm-hmm.
my worldview. Like there are many things that are unverifiable, so I don't have an issue with verifiability because even according to the the standards of science or philosophy of science, science is built
Mm-hmm.
upon its own presuppositions. So even
Mm-hmm.
if something's verifiable and it turns out to be true or false, that's still changeable. Like that, science is still like it could turn out to be false, even if it's verified to be true. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So there's
Yeah,
no
yeah. Now, okay. Now, my understanding of science is that, yeah, they do start they do start with presuppositions, because I think as we stated earlier, you and I could not think of a situation where someone would come in and have absolutely no presuppositions. We just don't think it's possible as far as you and I are concerned. Now, maybe there's somebody in chat who can say, no, I got a situation, but you and I together, we couldn't come up with one. So based on that premise, it follows that science does have their own presuppositions. Either they say this is not true or this is true, and then they go about the scientific method to gather data to test that, right? Is my understanding correct as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, I would say, for instance, let's just take the roundness of the Earth, right? So I could totally
Yeah.
imagine a scenario where something happens to the gravitational fields that are holding this crust together, and then it
Yeah.
somehow, you know how basketballs and other soccer balls and all of them are made. It's just flat. They use a flat leather piece, right? And then they curve it onto another object. So I could totally conceive of an idea of a scenario where the Earth could become flat at some point. Like you could peel off like the crust of the Earth, and at some point you could say like a round flat thing, not necessarily rectangular in shape. It would be like a round flat.
Hang on. Keep talking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Keep talking.
That's an example that I can give.
Okay.
That would demonstrate
So
that
as far
idea that our presuppositions about the roundness of the Earth are contingent on other laws of physics, other laws of nature. If those change, then the roundness of the Earth would change as well. It could become flat, depending on how you're defining this planet. I would say, for our existence purposes, like I would say, all you need is this, maybe few feet down below of where we are standing. That's enough for us to say that this is, because remember, back in the day, the scientists concluded that the Earth is flat because that's their observation. The observation, but it was an illusion, right?
Hey, Ben Abdaz, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you hang on for just a sec? I got to pause for just a minute. I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, say something. Yeah, this is better.
Okay. Is this better? All right. We'll just go with this then. Okay. So, sorry. Sorry for the interruption. Okay, I forgot where we were at.
We left that something as conclusive as saying that the Earth is oblate spheroid in shape could turn out to be false, depending on other scenarios.
Okay.
So that's what I meant by verifiable evidence not being, the most reliable in that sense. But there's certain things that I would say are impossible, like logical contradictions are impossible. So if anything is logically impossible, I would say those are the things that I would say don't exist.
Okay. And so you would say then that your definition of God is not logically impossible. So therefore, you're okay that it's unverifiable or untestable, I guess we could say. Untestable, unverifiable. Okay. Okay. I see where you're coming with that. And so I think I'm kind of at the end of of my question. So I have just one more. And it may lead to one or two follow-up questions. So sorry, I have a bad habit of doing that. But my maybe last question is, if we have folks who are using the same tools you have and they are coming up with different answers, then how can I, as just trying to be neutral, determine who is right or which one is true?
So if they're using the same tools like logic, I just don't think how two mutually exclusive claims can be true at the same time. So either they are correct or I'm correct.
Right. I agree. Yeah, exactly. So I guess that's what I'm asking is how do I figure that out? If I'm, if I'm kind of in between you two, or even, even as an atheist, how could, just someone who's completely neutral just determine, okay, is the atheist, is what the atheists say true? Is what the Abrahamic God believer saying is true, or is what the polytheistic God saying is true?
Yeah. So
Polytheistic believer saying is true.
the way I would approach this question is like I would really encourage the one who is seeking the truth to kind of uh, do a self-assessment of why they are seeking truth, why certain definitions of God are the definitions you ought to care about. So, for instance, why should I care about a less than all-powerful God versus an all-powerful God, where either accepting or rejecting the message has a consequence, right? So logically, I would, just like we go to school, we go to get groceries, we go to work, we make sure there's enough pressure in our tires. We are doing this thing to avoid harm, right? We're doing these things to enjoy life and gain happiness, just in this world. So if someone's making such a tremendous claim of afterlife, of God either granting you eternal peace or eternal punishment. That's a huge claim to be concerned about as a logical person. Like if someone's not even making that claim, so why should I care about? For instance, Buddhism does not make that claim. So if it's okay for me to not be a Buddhist, why are you calling towards Buddhism? Like what does it do to my existence? What does it do to my afterlife? So there are a lot of questions
I
that
see.
are that a lot of these other religions don't answer. So the going back to the inquiry, I would do a self-assessment. I would think about what definitions of God I should care about, and the only ones that in my opinion, that make a proper truth claim where there's an actual consequence to your life, to the life of your loved ones, are Islam and Christianity. Not even Judaism. Judaism does not even make a proper truth claim. So you'll never see a rabbi or any group of Jewish people proselytizing in a sense where they want others to accept, not in a pushy sense, but like not even they don't even care about if others accept their religion or not. So how can that be the objective truth if you claim that God has communicated to you people, like to your group, and it's a message for mankind? Then it should be shared. It should be like you should be worried about other people accepting it. So this is why I find Islam and Christianity more logical in that sense. But when you dig down deeper into the claims and evidences of Islam versus Christianity, I just think that Christianity has too many like issues with the definition of God being one and three and three in one. It has issues with the authors of the Bible being unknown, and no one knows who wrote the Bible, and the amount of contradictions in the Bible. Um, and I've done all this research. I've watched debates between Muslims and Christians. So in my research, like I just think that the absolute truth in terms of communication from this entity that we ought to care about would be Islam. So if you go down the chain of kind of reasoning how anything is true, and then you kind of do an assessment of all the four criteria of evidence that I gave, like logic, empiricism, personal experience, and what was the fourth one? Logic, empiricism, personal experience, and testimonial evidence.
Logic, empiricism, personal experience, testimony. Yeah, you said hearing information, evidence from other people. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say majority of it's kind of downtrodden. Like a lot of people kind of dismiss testimonial evidence, but most of the knowledge we have about the world around us is either through reading books, through watching something on TV, documentaries. I would say all of that is really testimonial evidence. It's just that you trust these people more than other people, right? So yeah, that would be my kind of.
All right.
Hey, it was nice talking to you, man. Like I have to actually take off.
Yeah, it was great talking to you, Bin Abdaz. Yeah, man. Thanks for coming up and you asked me some great questions too. So I really appreciate it.
All right, take care.
It's good to have a discussion like this. All right, man. Have a good day.
Yep. Bye.
All right. Bye.